Good afternoon. I just on my way back from a meeting about an issue that concerns all of us, which is the experience of our Asian American Pacific Islander community in the mass transit system, making sure that they feel safe and welcome, and got to meet with a mess of groups representing that community. Really important. 17% of our mass transit riders, and since COVID, it started a couple of years ago, they've obviously felt an upsurge of issues, of experiences that are impacting on their feelings of safety. In addition to what the governor and the mayor are doing, we need to focus on making sure we do some education, some outreach on those issues as well, for everybody's sake. I thank Sharif Solomon, who stood ready to occupy the chair, the vice chair of the Capital Program Committee. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Sharif Solomon, thank you. I'm going to call the October meeting of the Capital Program Committee to order. Do we have members of the public who are willing to speak?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. We have two members of the public registered to speak today. We have one in person and one virtual.
Great.
As a reminder, we ask that all public speakers adhere to the MTA's rules of conduct and decorum. I would also like to remind our public speakers that in the interest of time and fairness to all speakers, we limit everyone to 2 minutes. Please be aware there will be a warning beep to remind you that you have 30 seconds to conclude your remarks. First speaker will be Jason Anthony.
Hey, Jano. Hey, Jamie. Jason Anthony here for the last meeting of the day. Let's do Omni, like our beloved friend Al Portray, who is enjoying his retirement. It's Omni time. I love to see the Omni readers. And I was at Penn Station this past weekend helping tourists that were European. It's good to have Omni signage in multiple languages. Encourage them in multiple languages, of course, the benefits of utilizing Omni, because our visitors don't know that we have Omni. But it is good to see updates. Recently, I was in Philadelphia. They're doing upgrades to their tap and go system. We should have to our commuter rails something similar to SEPTA's commuter rail, Sunrail in Orlando, Florida, and LA. But I would love to see Omni to those who are benefiting from the Fairfares program and the mobile app, and integrate it to Apple Pay, Google Pay, and others. And I would love to see finally the Omni vending machines in our 472 subway stations. And I'll see you guys on Wednesday morning.
Thank you. Our final speaker is Andy Pollock.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you, Jano. All right, so good afternoon, everyone. A couple of things. Number one, it seems the Omni rollout is starting to come together for the reduced fare customers. This is excellent news. And I did see on the Omni website that it looks like by the end of this year, the reduced fare Omni cards will be available. So I can't wait to get my hands on one. I've been waiting a very long time for this moment. Okay, the main reason why I wanted to talk to Chair Lieber this afternoon was about QueensLink. So the QueensLink project, I feel, should be supported by Mayor Adams, given that a lot of people in Queens, and especially yours truly, have dealt with the hardships and the inconvenience of dealing with the overcrowded Q52, Q53 select bus. I think this is going to save a lot of people time throughout the central corridor of Woodhaven Boulevard in Queens. And again, I really wish the mayor would support this project. And there is one more thing I want to discuss regarding Grand Central Madison. So hopefully most of you have seen the newspaper articles in Newsday and Daily News. In Newsday, they mentioned that there may not be a significant increase in service, according to a Newsday watchdog article that was published yesterday. And in this morning's Daily News, they claimed that a project in Sunnyside was shortchanged because of Grand Central. So when it's time to negotiate the capital budget for 2024, sometime next year, we need to discuss that Sunnyside project, because I think it'll save a lot of people time in Sunnyside, Long Island City, trying to get into Midtown Manhattan. So that's pretty much it, Jano. Thank you for letting me speak this afternoon, and I expect to speak to the committees again in November.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, that concludes the public comment session.
Thank you, Ms. King. And copies of the September Capital Program Committee minutes have been distributed and are available on the website. Any changes or comments at this time? Hearing none, may I have a motion to approve? Second? Thank you. All in favor? Aye. The minutes are approved. Brian, are there any changes to the committee work plan?
Mr. Chairman, there are no changes to the committee work plan.
Thank you. May I turn it over now to Jamie Torres Springer for the President's update?
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. Just get our slides going here. Good to be back with the Capital Program Committee this month. Few updates for you. Of course, on October 3rd, we opened the Long Island Railroad third track, commissioning the last block of the track itself. We'll hear more about that from my colleague Mark Roche at the full board on Wednesday. It's a huge accomplishment for MTA Construction and Development, really the signature project so far that C&D was created in order to deliver in an on-time and under-budget fashion. And we're very proud of it, and we'll hear more about that on Wednesday. A few days later, we opened the Elmont UBS Arena station, the westbound portion of the station. This was a great celebration, great moment, enabled by Third Track, but also a public-private partnership with New York Arena Partners, which is the consortium of the Oak Group, New York Islanders, and Jeff Wilpon, who paid for 90% of this station. And then the additional 10% state contribution, of course, is just a fraction of the new tax revenue that we expect to generate from having great access to UBS Arena for Islanders games and a range of additional events. So this is a great accomplishment that we're very proud of as we expand Long Island Railroad service later this year into Grand Central Madison. More than 200 people joined us for a jobs event that we held in East Harlem last week in partnership with the Building and Construction Trades Council. This was to create awareness about opportunities to work on the range of projects in our $55 billion capital program, but in particular, two projects that will be built in East Harlem in the coming years: the Park Avenue Viaduct project, which we expect to award a contract for this year, and of course the Second Avenue Subway project, which we're working diligently with our partners at the federal government to get into a full funding grant agreement so that we can proceed with the project. Great job opportunities for East Harlemites, and it was great to have that turnout. I want to note that, and we'll talk about this in some future board meeting, the opportunity to require and encourage local hiring is now enabled by policy changes that the federal government has made recently within the Biden administration. And so for Park Avenue Viaduct, other projects will be able to support additional local hiring. And also we're working hard on pre-apprenticeship opportunities so that we have a pipeline for folks that are hired locally right into apprenticeships, jobs on those projects, which is a great opportunity. It all fits together as we ensure that the economic and workforce development benefits of our capital program are secured. At last month's board meeting, I talked about the importance of our core infrastructure and the need to constantly renew it to meet new challenges. With the 10th anniversary of Superstorm Sandy coming up in a couple of days, it's a moment to reflect on the resiliency needs our system faces and the work that we've done to address it. As the MTA picked up the pieces from Superstorm Sandy 10 years ago, it was clear that massive investments would be needed, not just to restore damaged assets, but to systematically upgrade our resiliency across our system. Thanks in particular to support from our federal partners, as well as insurance proceeds and local funding, including MTA funding, we put together an ambitious $7.8 billion program to comprehensively address coastal storm risks throughout New York City Transit, Metro North, Long Island Railroad, and our bridges and tunnels. At this point, we've committed $6 billion addressing our most vulnerable facilities throughout the system and ensuring that should another Sandy hit, or a comparable storm, we will be much, much more resilient. So I wanted to give an overview of some of these investments today, and then Dana Hecht, who heads our infrastructure business unit, will provide a more detailed look at a few key investments that are currently underway and coming to completion in back-of-house facilities. Within the subway system, restoring our under-river tunnels and making them more resilient was a top priority. With the completion of the Rutgers F-train tube last year, rehabilitation of all 9 subway tunnels that sustained damage have now been completed. We've also rehabilitated 2 vehicular tunnels. Additional work, and this is a key point, we're not just going in and recovering and putting back what was there, but taking the opportunity to do additional work in strategic ways. So additional work during the rehabilitations, of course, included replacement and upgrade of many other components, including cables, tracks, signals, backup power, pumping capacity, and improving communications throughout those tunnels, as we've seen before. So those 9 tunnels have been completed. 8 subway stations saw major flooding during Sandy, and that damage has been addressed, including, of course, the major rehabilitation of South Ferry Station, which reopened in 2017. But we've taken a wider lens to comprehensively protect each of the 31 subway stations that fall within the Category 2 hurricane flood zone. With over 3,500 street-level openings now protected, the type of inundation that we experienced during Sandy would be prevented at those stations in a similar storm. Retrofitting a 100-year-old system that was not designed to be waterproof or dry flood proofed in particular is an incredible challenge, but one that we've met through a variety of solutions, as you can see, ensuring that we can both keep the water out and then to the extent that there are failures and water does get in, that we're able to waterproof the key facilities that are in there. While some of the most dramatic images of Sandy were in our stations and tunnels, our back-of-house facilities were also hit hard. Our yards, depots, substations, pump rooms have also needed substantial rehabilitation and protection against future events. These facilities, like Coney Island Yard, pictured here, are being protected again against a Category 2 hurricane, plus an additional 3 feet of freeboard, which is our standard for vulnerable projects across the transit system. And again, Dana will speak to this project and others in more detail in a couple of minutes. The subway wasn't the only part of the system that was hit. Metro North and Long Island Railroad also experienced major damage and disruptions and faced the same sort of challenges. LIR's Long Beach branch was restored and fortified with its critical infrastructure raised to prevent such damage in a future storm, and similar work has been done along Metro North's Hudson Line. Over at Bridges and Tunnels, where many facilities were also impacted, we've made dramatic improvements to infrastructure to make them more secure and resilient. The Hugh Carey Tunnel was one such site of major flooding during Sandy. Now, as pictured, it's protected by flood doors, as well as other less visible fixes, like an added seawall along the Governor's Island vent building. As impressive as this work has been, there's still more to come. These aren't quick fixes, and they've required sustained investment and focused project management over the past decade. $3.8 billion in projects have been completed, with another $2.2 billion worth of projects under construction. Very importantly, we're advancing an additional $300 million worth of projects in procurement, and $500 million of new projects we were able to add to the program on the strength of getting good bids and finding savings in the projects that we initially set out to implement. This is a huge advantage to delivering the program in the way that we've been delivering it, is that we're able to do additional work with dollars that are allocated. The remainder of the funding is held for the East River Tunnel Rehabilitation Project. Those are the 2 remaining tunnels to be rehabilitated. That will be managed by Amtrak and some reserves that are required by the FTA. Some of these upcoming projects you'll hear Dana speak to, including a critical project to round out resiliency investments in the Rockaways and more yard resiliency projects across the city. Of course, even as we approach the end of our formal Sandy program, we're not done making the system more resilient. As storms like Ida have shown, climate change is only accelerating and its challenges extend far beyond coastal storm surge. Over the summer, we presented the findings of a board working group, including many members of this committee, on flash flooding, including a targeted plan for interventions to address heavy rain events. These events affect an entirely different and far less predictable geography than coastal flooding does. So this requires new forms of intervention. We have our first package implementing capital upgrades out in procurement right now, with another to follow next year, and also, and I really emphasize this, sustained engagement with our partner agencies, including city agencies, DEP and DOT, to develop broader, more comprehensive solutions in areas where there's heavy rainfall flooding. And that's really the participation and cooperation where we have this very complex condition is what's going to get us to protecting our system. And of course, it's not just about resiliency projects with a capital R. As Dana will speak to, all of our projects are designed with resiliency measures incorporated now. So we're able to address the many hazards and risks that come up from climate change and other issues in the future. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to provide that overview, and I'll hand things over to Dana for the infrastructure update. Please.
Yes, go ahead, please.
So, Jamie, you mentioned flood mitigation and protection for the Coney Island and 207th Street yards. Wasn't the Lenox yard also affected, as it's right on the Harlem River, and hasn't also been protected?
We have done 100 back of house facilities, and I need to check with Dana and Bob to see if Lenox was one of them.
Lenox was not one of them. It did not flood as bad as the other locations.
So nothing's been done for that one?
No, sir.
Thank you.
But I think the question goes to whether there needs to be something done. So let's answer that for the board member.
We can definitely get back to you. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. But there is a lot of need and a lot of progress on Coney Island and 207. So Dana, have at it.
Okay, so if you can't hear me, please let me know as I go through the presentation today. As Jamie has indicated, I'm Dana Hecht, and I'm the SVP for Infrastructure. And today we'll be discussing the portfolio of projects that make up the Infrastructure Business Unit. In staying with the theme and the acknowledgement of the 10-year anniversary of Sandy, we'll focus specifically on what has been accomplished thus far throughout the system. And a good example of this is what is shown on the screen. On the left, you can see the obvious devastation that was caused to the old Clifton shop on Staten Island. And on the right is an aerial view of the new state-of-the-art maintenance shop. This building is also going to serve as the new Staten Island Railway headquarters. And use of the new shop began in spring of this year. We're very proud of this facility. This slide provides a general overview of the diversity and magnitude of the assets that we support through capital delivery. As Jamie spoke about at the last board meeting, some of these projects may not be so exciting to many, but I personally love our core infrastructure program. They don't get the recognition they deserve, but yet the system's reliability and efficiency could not function without them. Projects like Penn Station and East Side Access, which obviously address critical system needs, would not be possible without the core infrastructure program. As you can see, we have a robust $9 billion program of various asset types, and they span the phases from scoping through construction. And obviously, delivering a program of this complexity is not without its challenges, some of which are listed. But to keep up with the demands for addressing all of our needs, we are consistently challenging ourselves to find more innovative ways to deliver through strong program management and smart resource supplementation. So allow me to highlight some of our Sandy resiliency projects. As Jamie mentioned, through funds saved, we were able to progress 2 other yard projects. Both projects are completing design. and will be awarded in 2023. The Corona Yard will focus on individual asset hardening, while Westchester Yard will include a 3,300 linear foot flood wall, 3 floodgates, and drainage improvements. Currently in procurement is the enormous Rockaway Line Resiliency and Rehabilitation Bundle, which comprehensively addresses the remaining resiliency and repair needs in the Rockaways. The MTA has already invested over $150 million in this location, including a large protective flood wall, along with flood doors to protect individual assets. The current project addresses the A line with hardening of critical infrastructure, system redundancy, and rehabilitation of the Hamels Y structure, the Rockaway Viaduct, and the South Channel Bridge, which is a mechanical bridge. On the left side of this slide is the 148th Street project, 148th Street Yard project. It has won national and regional recognition by the American Council of Engineering Companies. The picture shows the construction of the portal protection within the 148th Street Yard. The stop logs are being installed at the mouth of the portal to prevent water from entering the tunnel and impacting service on the 3 line. This project will be completed next month. 2 other yards that suffer.
Dana, may I just interrupt to mention that to Board Member Albert, that is the Lennox Yard. You confused us with your vast knowledge of the nomenclature of the system, but I will say that I walked this yard with Dana 2 or 3 weeks ago, and the project is almost substantially complete, and the flood protection along the Harlem River, so it's great. That project has been great.
And I did see my beloved Yankee Stadium from there, but we won't go there. So there, as Jamie spoke about earlier, too, there's 2 other yards that suffered severe impacts from Superstorm Sandy, and those are the Coney Island Yard and the 207th Street Yard, which I will now provide updates on the progress of these. So the Coney Island Yard at 100 acres is the largest combined train storage and train maintenance facility in North America. The yard services 8 lines, and when Superstorm Sandy flooded this yard with millions of gallons of water, it created havoc, damaging the tracks, the signals, and corroded the electrical service. Due to the extensive damage, service was shut down on the D&N lines to Stillwell Terminal for almost 2 weeks. The rush of excessive water even caused backup through floor drains, causing flooding within some of the facilities within the yard as well. Well, not only repairing the damage left by Sandy, but also protecting against a future storm is a massive undertaking, particularly in the train yard setting. The Coney Island Yard complex stores 800 rail cars, and it houses 26 facilities, such as an overhaul shop, traction power shop, maintenance shop, and fire training skill. This slide shows the major contract elements being constructed to protect, harden, and repair the yard, but it does not truly illustrate how complex this effort is. I will try and provide some context of this magnitude of some of the elements of construction taking place. Totaling the linear feet of underground drainage, flood walls which are driven 30 feet deep, and power cables for the cable bridge, it actually equates to over 85 miles, or 3/4 the length of Long Island. So the necessity to maintain operations of all rail and yard facilities, along with tight site constraints, unique track configuration, and the risk of unknown underground obstructions made proper planning during design that much more crucial. Seen on this picture is a crane installing the flood wall from a temporary access road that was installed to facilitate better access. Another example of this planning is the cable power bridge, which was prefabricated off-site. Intelligent planning during design, tight coordination with in-house forces, and with the neighboring properties have been critical in the success thus far. Work has progressed well despite the complexity and constraints, and over 90% of the 12,000 linear foot flood wall has been installed, as well as 100% of the 20,000 linear feet of underground drainage, along with the power and communication cables. The 2 pump stations are constructed, and the 4 circuit breaker houses, which were added for construction efficiency, have been rehabbed. Signals and final electrical tie-ins are now forecasted to push into the first quarter of 2023. However, the flood mitigation portion of the project is 95% complete, and the yard will be fully protected by the end of this year. So moving on to 207th Street Yard. This photo highlights the 43-acre 207th Street Yard in Upper Manhattan, which is almost comparable in size to that of the Brooklyn Botanical Gardens. And very similar to the Coney Island yard, this yard experienced major flooding causing yard damage and disruption to the A-line. The water came in like a geyser from the sewer manholes, and it surged from the Harlem River in the back of the yard, flowing into the portal, which you can see here in purple, and it also flooded mainline tracks. The sewer relocation from the yard to the street will ensure that this type of water infiltration does not occur again, and the seawall, flood wall, portal gates, and yard floodgates will fortify against the Category 2 plus 3 foot storms. The two signal relay buildings, which are noted in the middle of the screen, are the largest in the MTA system, facilitating system modernization. Last year, we awarded a third project to replace mainline tracks and interlockings just outside the yard between 200 and 207th Streets. And although the project is still ongoing, the yard is currently protected against a 100-year flood and will be fortified in time for the 2023 storm season. As noted in the previous slide, the yard is 43 acres. There are 37 miles of installation within this tight space, including the track, the traction power cables, third rail, flood wall protection, conduit, and sewer pipe. This is 5 miles more than the 32-mile perimeter of Manhattan. In addition to the inherent complexity of constructing in a small space, all while maintaining subway service, it is not unusual to encounter unforeseen site conditions. During construction of the 65 feet deep seawall, we unearthed JFK's PT-59 Navy gunboat, which was discovered under 6 feet of water and 8 feet of mud. Given the aforementioned complexities, the need for sound and coordinated management was imperative. MTA C&D's approach was to manage these separate contracts under one management team. This has allowed for the optimization of track outages, coordination of critical work, and sharing of transit resources, which has resulted in more flexibility to adjust contract schedules, along with maximizing work opportunities between the various contracts. An example of coordination amongst the projects was to rephase the installation of the yard floodgates along the 215th Street to enable the sewer contractor to get in first to utilize this area for sewer installation. This successfully reduced a scheduled delay to the sewer project by approximately 11 months. The yard and sewer projects are still showing slight delays. The yard project delay is due to COVID and supply chain issues, which are related to Siemens factory staff, cement, and electrical equipment. The sewer delay was due to post-COVID sidewalk seating and unforeseen underground utilities. We are working closely with each contractor, and we're confident that we will be able to bring these schedules back in. So another Sandy project is the 26 substation hardening project, which is currently in the procurement phase. It focuses on the hardening of the core infrastructure of our substations. However, beyond Sandy projects, given lessons learned from the superstorm along with the undeniable effects of climate change, we have advanced our approach to embed resiliency and sustainability into everything we do. Our resiliency design guidelines are applied to all projects, ensuring that critical components and systems are elevated or relocated out of flood zones. Watertight cabinets and flood-resistant cabling is used. And where applicable, high water alarms are included in our facilities. Substations are assets that exemplify the need for both state of good repair and protecting against water infiltration as we continue to upgrade and modernize our system. They work hard to keep the New York City Transit subways and Staten Island Railway running, like the new MassPath substation in Brooklyn that you're looking at on this slide. This was recently completed in 2021 to support CBTC for the L line. I will now share a short video that explains a little further about substations and how we work to integrate them into the communities into which we are neighbors.
The New York City subway is one of the fastest, greenest ways to get around the city. In order to efficiently move millions of people and thousands of rail cars over hundreds of miles of track without fossil fuels, the MTA needs power, a lot of power. Delivering that power depends on a network of over 200 substations spread throughout the city to convert high voltage AC power from the electrical grid to lower voltage DC power the trains need to run. Since substations are so critical, they're distributed systematically to increase redundancy. That means if a substation needs to be taken offline for some reason, a nearby substation can pick up the slack. However, some of NYCT's substations and their components have been around for decades. That means investment is needed to keep the system resilient.
Existing substations like this have been around for over 100 years. So over time, equipment goes past its useful life, and as that goes on, we come in to do the modernization to upgrade and rehab them. So we take out the old equipment, we bring in something new that's for resiliency, that makes it safer for use so that everything will run smoothly.
Central Substation powers the B, D, F, M, and E trains in Midtown and is in the process of being modernized. By renovating our existing substations and installing new components, we can preserve the system's redundancy. But as we continue to modernize the system with new technology like CBTC, we occasionally need to add a new substation to expand our wayside power capabilities. This basketball court on Canal Street and 6th Avenue will soon be the new home of an underground substation that will support the 8th Avenue Line CBTC project.
One of the biggest challenges we face in building new wayside power facilities is finding a constructible location that's suitable to the end user and agreeable to the local community.
When the Canal Street substation is complete, it'll look something like this. This is a brand new underground facility that was built in Williamsburg to support the addition of CBTC to the L line. We know that construction can be disruptive, so we're always careful to leave a work area better than when we started. When this substation is complete, this basketball court will be leveled, resurfaced, and landscaped. Whether we're renewing an existing substation or working with the community to construct a new one, our resiliency design guidelines ensure that our assets are watertight and protected from future weather events. Keeping our critical components safe and dry greatly improves the reliability of our system.
I will now turn it over to the IEC for reporting, and I will welcome any questions after. Thanks.
Mr. DeVito.
Thank you. Good afternoon. The Coney Island Yard report by the IEC begins on page 14 of your committee book. Overall, the project is 90% complete with a budget and estimated completion of $521 million. The IEC's review of the project expenditures, change orders, contingency, and other cost categories find that the project EAC will remain within budget. Regarding its schedule, since last report, unforeseen conditions, which resulted in the replacement of cables that were damaged during the installation of wall sheeting, caused a 3-month impact to the schedule. While flood protection and resiliency work are on track for completion by December of 22, the overall project completion date is now forecasted to be March of 2023. The IEC concurs with this completion date. We should note that until the flood protection and resiliency work is complete, C&D has directed the contractor to take all the necessary steps to ensure measures are in place to protect Coney Island Yard from storm damage as per contract requirements. The top project risks, very typical, that the contractor may encounter additional unknown underground utilities or obstructions where subsurface cables are planned. And to mitigate this risk, C&D has directed the contractor to perform added underground utility surveys and increase the number of test pits, thereby reducing the possibility of encountering any other cables or obstructions. Also, that the track outages may not occur when needed due to operational requirements. To mitigate this risk, the project team has worked closely with the yardmaster and operations to develop a schedule which allows the work to be accomplished while minimizing disruptions to the yard operation. The IEC believes these mitigations adequately address the risks, and we have confidence in this project meeting the latest forecast substantial completion date. And that concludes Coney Island. On 207th Street Yard begins on page 19 of your committee book. Overall, this project is 81% complete with a current budget of $633 million and a forecasted estimated completion of $637 million, primarily due to a recent increase in soft costs. The IEC has reviewed all the project expenditures and outstanding costs and concur with the current budget and EAC. Regarding schedule, since the last report, the contractor's latest submission indicates substantial completion date of January 2024. This reflects a recovery of 4 months to the project, accomplished by advancing the signal system breakdown testing, where possible, followed by installation and field testing of the signal equipment, as mentioned by Dana earlier. This resequencing allows the project to concentrate the resources on the critical Building A work, and the IEC agrees with C&D's latest substantial completion date. Again, all flood protection and resiliency work are planned to be completed in January of 2023. Until then, as with Coney Island, the C&D has directed the contractor to take all the necessary steps to ensure measures are in place to protect the yard from any storm damage this year, as per contract requirements. The top project risks that the planned track outages may not occur when needed or take longer than anticipated, and to mitigate the risk, the project and the contractor have worked closely with the yardmaster, similar to the last project, so it allows the work to be completed while minimizing disruptions to the yard. The IEC would like to highlight the fact that they've had cooperative spirit evident between C&D, Transit, and the contractors to overcome these challenges they've faced and mitigated the issues, thereby reducing the forecast delay by 4 months. And that concludes our report on 207th Street Yard. The 207th Street Sewer Project begins on page 25 of your book. The project stands at 45% complete, with a budget of $152 million and an EAC of $163 million, significantly reduced from the last report by improving the project's schedule completion. While the project continues to look for ways to further reduce the cost, the IEC recognizes their efforts in achieving the reductions to date. Regarding schedule, since the last report, actions taken by C&D to minimize delays have improved the project completion date by 9 months in our analysis, from January 2025 to April of 2024. There still remains a risk of encountering differing site conditions which could impact construction operations like excavation and microtunneling. To mitigate this risk, the project has, like 2 previous projects, is undertaking added test pits and borings along the sewer system alignment. And we believe that this minimizes the potential risk of delay. And that concludes our report on 207th Street Yard. Back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, any questions or comments from the board? Mr. Bringerman.
Okay, 2 questions. First one goes back to Jamie's original presentation, where you mentioned about the Amtrak coordination, the money we have set aside for that. Do we have a date when Amtrak's going to start doing the work on those 2 tunnels under the East River?
Yes, we do, Board Member Brigham. I don't have the date with me, but we do have a full schedule for what we refer to as the regional improvements, which are largely concentrated around Herald Interlocking and Sunnyside Yard. A number of projects are precedents to the rehabilitation of the East River Tunnel, so we've made that agreement that Amtrak will do that work. And we're working closely with Amtrak to try to get through the precedent work, the work that has to happen beforehand, which is dependent on Amtrak supplying adequate support for us to get that work done. So we can come back to you with the detailed schedule, but the main thing is we have to get there in order for the tunnels to get rehabilitated.
Well, I know Amtrak runs very slow. My big concern is that they finish within the window of East Side access opening and Penn access opening. So they got that, was it 2-year window maybe, or 2.5-year window?
It's till 2027.
And just to your point, the reason that your question is important is the throughput of the whole East River Tunnel complex and all the 4 different tunnels constrains how much service we can provide. Still, we're getting 40% more Long Island Railroad service because East Side access, the Grand Central Madison service provides new access to Manhattan from Long Island. But in the event, when Amtrak completes the extra tunnel rehab, we have the ability, if the ridership warrants, to add even more service beyond the 40%. So your point is well taken.
Okay. And the second question is, I know we've announced their track is complete. The track is complete, but we've been getting a lot of flack from ridership and whatever. You've heard some of it at the committee meetings earlier. oh, there's still a lot of work to be done. So when will all the ancillary, all the related work, the finishing of the Westbury Station, I know there were a lot of complaints about Mineola not being finished. When should we have all that put to bed? Another 5-6 months, maybe?
There's work to be completed, to finish it up, scheduled for completion in early 2023.
Okay.
But the main thing is that and this is why we emphasize this, the capacity improvements from Third Track that enable that 40% increase in our service when Grand Central Madison opens, those capacity improvements are complete.
Right. No, the board members, I think, all understand that it's the general public, and then they go to Westbury Station, they go to use the men's room, and the construction workers are still in there
Sure,
roughing out
there's some-
plumbing,
yeah,
so.
That's right, there's some work left. And we'll emphasize this at the full board meeting. I mean, it's just the extent to which this is such a major project. I mean, not just extending Third Track, but really reconstructing the entire 10-mile stretch of the main line that the project applies to. So it's just an enormously.
I've been there, so I understand.
I
but-
know you understand, yeah.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Glucksman.
Thank you. Harold Interlocking is well inland, but it's a huge place there. There are flood mitigation, is there, in case the water doesn't collect, and it can be gotten rid of quickly if it's necessary?
I'm not aware of coastal flood risk at Harold Interlocking. It's something I'll have
No,
to
but
check.
I mean, heavy rains and stuff like that.
Certainly part of the work that's been done in Harold as part of Grand Central Madison or East Side Access has been reconstructing all of the infrastructure within the yard, which includes, the resiliency of tracks and signals and switches, but also pump capacity. I mean, the yard is really fully renovated. But it's a good question. I'll dig
Thank
in
you.
myself and get the details of that. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Since no one else I just want to emphasize that Coney Island Yard, 207th Street Yard, these are mega projects, and this organization under Jamie's leadership is keeping these incredibly complex projects not as sexy as opening new stations or opening new lines, but our ability to operate the system depends on putting these back. You've got 2 miles of flood wall being installed 40 feet deep in the ground. You got the entire infrastructure in Coney Island Yard being lifted up and put on bridges so it never again is subject to the destructive force of salt water. I mean, these are extraordinary projects. You have the brand new mega sewer system up at 207th Street, schedule brought forward. Remember, that's not our sewer necessarily, but the cities, they have a problem with sewer capacity. We're rebuilding the entire sewer, schedule brought forward because of management. So just when we talk about how Third Track and other great projects are being managed, don't forget about the infrastructure projects. These are mega projects too, and from an operational standpoint, keeping operation going, equally complex and equally important to the system. Good job, Dana and the infrastructure team. With that, let me invite, is there any other discussion to be had on infrastructure? Okay. We'll move on at this point to hear from Amy about Omni, another breakthrough project that's underway.
Hi, thank you, Chairman Lieber. Good afternoon and hello again. My name is Amy Linden. I am currently the acting lead for the MTA Fair Payment Programs Department, which includes the design, build, management, and operation of the Omni project. I am pleased to provide the Capital Program Committee with this update on the Omni Design Build project. This chart shows the continuous growth in the New York City Transit customers using Omni ever since December 2020, when the installation of all Omni validators at stations and buses was completed. Every day, more and more customers are taking advantage of the ease and convenience of Omni Tap and Go with their own personal bank card or digital wallets on their smartphone or watch. Presently, the Omni system processes over 2.1 million unique bank cards each week and over 1.7 million transactions on weekdays. By the end of September, fare payment with Omni had increased to more than 1/3 of all bus and subway rides taken. As you are aware, Omni is a multi-phase design-build project. Since my last report to you in January, we have completed Omni project deliverables that support several new customer features, many of which are first-of-their-kind customer benefits. For example, some of these features will provide our reduced fare and paratransit customers with new choices for how they pay the fare. During the last few months in a soft launch, over 1,200 existing reduced fare customers have already enjoyed the new benefit of paying their fare with their own personal bank cards or digital wallets. I can't emphasize this next point enough. This is in parity with our full fare customers who have been able to use their personal cards and phones ever since Omni launched. And as announced by Q earlier today at the Transit Committee, this feature is now open to all existing reduced fare customers. For our paratransit customers, again as announced by Q today, in the coming weeks, they will be able to pay for their AAR trips online with their bank card, bank account, or stored value placed in their AAR ID card account. We also developed the Omni chatbot, a self-service tool for customers that sits on the Omni website. The chatbot can now be used by existing reduced fare customers to easily get their bank card or digital wallet ready to tap and go with their reduced fare benefit. And if I may, as Q did this morning, I really have to give a shout out to several teams, including Q's team, Rachel, Howie, and Sarah, for improving and working with us on the chatbot, to VJ at IT, who helped us link the reduced fare database to the Omni back office, to Cubic, our system integrator, and to their partner Pipestream, a New York City-based business, because we really have two innovations today, not just reduced fare on bank cards, but also a self-service digital assistant. And to my team, Dante, Jordan, Liz, Suhail, Jesse, Eddie, and Jean and their staff. This really shows what MTA can do with its own imagination and with the ingenuity of its vendor partners. In addition to releasing new software, we've installed a large amount of equipment to support reduced fare services at 2 Broadway, 3 Stone Street, and on the current MetroCard mobile sales vans, and to support paratransit services at 2 Broadway. The Omni Retail Network was introduced 1 year ago. The retail network supports Omni card sales and reloads. The team worked to roll out the retail network on an expedited basis to ensure those who use cash could benefit from the MTA's best fare or weekly fare cap that was introduced this past February. Since then, more than 600 locations have been added to the network, bringing the network size to over 4,600 retail locations. Until we could ensure confidence in the availability of cards at the retailers, no marketing effort was made yet to support the retail network and Omni cards. The retail network is now geographically robust and stable, thanks to teamwork among our vendor Cubic, their subcontractor Incom, the Omni staff, and special efforts from our new retail partners. And the MTA is beginning to promote the retail network and the availability of the Omni card, initially targeting subway stations with higher volumes of cash use at MetroCard vending machines. I've described some of the strides we've made since January in introducing more Omni software and equipment identified for 2022. These strides were not made without some hitches along the way. Software released in May for reduced fare and paratransit operations did have several issues that we found during in-service testing. The reduced fare software issues have been remedied, and as already mentioned, the MTA announced this morning that reduced fare customers can begin their transition from MetroCard to Omni using their own payment devices. The vendor plans to complete the paratransit software fixes during next month. This will enable a planned pilot with paratransit customers who will try out their new AAR ID Omni card to start in the coming weeks. Looking ahead in 2023, we will be looking to begin the installation of the Omni vending machines and to release the rest of the software deliverables for New York City Transit, including support for transit benefit providers, public school student passes, and other special programs for revenue and non-revenue customers, such as first responder passes and MTA employee passes. We also expect to conclude the design workshops with the railroad this month that will culminate in a final design review to be conducted in the first quarter of 2023. We are approximately halfway through the multi-year design build of Omni, currently at 49% of expended budget. Since our last report in January, the vendor has reforecast project completion based on remaining scope for each of New York City Transit and the railroads. This vendor reforecast indicates potential further slippage since January of the following completion dates, that is slippage by 1 quarter for transit, 2 quarters for the railroads, and up to 3 quarters for contract substantial completion. The dates for completion presented on this slide are the vendor's projected dates. We have not accepted these dates as a formal change to the contract. We are working with the vendor to understand the basis for their changed forecast and what is required to improve it. The effort to align on a reforecast is ongoing at this time. A major factor in the new forecast is the change order for the further definition and expansion of the railroad requirements, which is in procurement. We are targeting the change order and the contract modification that will be needed to accommodate an agreed reforecasted schedule to go to the board for approval by year's end. Other change orders that the MTA is currently analyzing and negotiating with the vendor are expected to be funded within the established program budget. We continue to tackle all risks as they materialize to mitigate or eliminate them. As we state at every meeting, this is a continuous process, especially as some risks are inherent throughout a complex software and hardware project of this nature. We have listed the risks of most concern at this time, along with the mitigation strategies we are employed to mitigate them to the greatest extent possible. Since January, we have been able to complete the mitigation of the risk to Omni Media availability from the global shortage of chips and plastic and have removed it from the list above. We and our vendor continue to monitor that situation to make sure we stay ahead of the curve. At our direction, the vendor has stood up a performance testing lab, among other improvements in their quality control processes and testing regimes. We have also gotten agreement from the vendor to build a production testing lab, a first of its kind for transit worldwide. We have added a new risk to the list pertaining to vendor resources because we concluded, based on more recent experiences, that as we continue to add features and complexity to the Omni system, the vendor resources to support both the continued design build and the operation of the system need to be scaled up accordingly. Omni is on the move. In 3 short years that span the entire pandemic, Omni keeps proving it can keep pace with MTA riders. Just looking at our numbers, Omni processed its first 1 millionth tap in August 2019, and less than 3 years later, in April of this year, April processed 1 million taps in just 1 day for the subway alone. An even more remarkable milestone was reached last month, though, when Omni crossed the threshold of 1/2 billion taps processed to date. Thank you, and I'll be happy to answer questions.
Shall we hear from the IEC first, and then we'll get into questions? IEC?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our report on the Omni system begins on page 33 of your books. Overall, this project is 49% complete and on budget at $772 million. The project has achieved on-time introduction of contactless payments on New York City Transit subway and buses, as well as launching the MTA's fare capping program, with the introduction of reduced fare and paratransit being imminent. However, since our last report, the project has experienced delays to key milestones such as the installation of New York City Transit configurable vending machines, Omni revenue system, as well as the introduction of Omni to the commuter railroads, which is impacting the project's substantial completion. Progress cannot be made in these areas until change orders are executed and a rebaseline schedule is approved. The IEC schedule analysis finds that 33 months are required to complete the remaining commuter railroad work from start of final design review. Assuming both an approved rebaseline schedule and execution of the pending change orders by the first quarter of 2023, the IEC forecasts that New York City Transit work should be completed by third quarter of 2024, and the overall project substantial completion in the fourth quarter of 2025, a 14-month delay since our last report. Regarding budget, the IEC has reviewed project costs and confirms there are sufficient funds available to allow the project to complete at the current estimated completion of $772 million. This does not include several change orders which are still being negotiated and whose impact has not yet been determined. The top project risks, their associated mitigations, and IEC opinions are spelled out in the report in our committee, in your committee book. One observation is that the contractor's quality control process needs continuous improvement to meet timely project deliverables, such as reliable functioning software to provide the best possible customer experience. The Omni PMO is closely monitoring the testing of the hardware and the software to ensure the product delivered is functioning as intended. And this concludes the IEC's report on Omni. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Board member questions or comments? Blanca Lopez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Amy, for this presentation. I guess for my benefit and perhaps also for my colleague, Mr. Chu, since we're new, and I believe the last presentation you said was in January, I would like to have more information on the rollout for the railroads and how, I just, for example, what is the final design review stage? What does that mean? And I hesitate, or I'm just worried because of the fact that as the Metro cards are going to expire, I think in 2024, if I'm not mistaken, how would we use Omni in our Beeline bus system, because we use Metro cards, so people have to use exact change. So in terms of validators, or perhaps this could be a conversation we have, another point, but I just have a couple questions about how it will operate in Westchester County, I'm sure in Long Island as well. And my other comment or question has to do with the actual Omni card. So just like other cards, will customers have to pay a fee to use it and then add to it? Like, how does the Omni card work? I assume that's for people who don't have, who are unbanked or underbanked, but just a clarification on that. Thank you.
Got to put it back on. Thanks. Let me take them in reverse order, shorter to longer. So the Omni card, which is available now, that's the full fare Omni card, that's available around the retail network that I described in my presentation. There is a card fee of $5, and then, yes, it needs to be the account of the card loaded with transit value or stored value, which can be done at the retail network or easily online through an Omni account, and one can use a bank card or their bank account to load the card and also to set auto reload. That card will be usable wherever there are Omni validators, which is a good segue into the question you had about what we call the MetroCard affiliates. But let me just stop. Did I answer your Omni card question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So Westchester Beeline, along with Roosevelt Island, AirTrain, JFK, and the NICE bus system out on Long Island are known as the MetroCard affiliates, who have worked with us and are working with us in order to join or get integrated with the Omni system. The actual integrations aren't technically part of the contract, but in terms of being able to decommission MetroCard, obviously all the systems transit systems that rely on MetroCard need to join Omni or replace their use of MetroCard with another system. So Beeline does plan to join. We've been working with them on their concept of operations, and the intent is to try and complete the Westchester Beeline, if that was your particular concern, before the end of next year. We have to complete the majority of the New York City transit software for our vendor and us to be able to actually do the integrations. That's a contractual requirement in order to make sure MTA is actually getting the work done for MTA customers. But they are getting scheduled for the latter part of next year, the last quarter. And then the railroads, originally, and it's part of the reason there's such a gap between transit completion and railroad completion. Originally, the railroads and transit were envisioned as being completed together, but when the railroads joined the contract somewhat last minute, their requirements weren't spelled out in great detail. So time has been spent in the last year and a half to spell them out in much greater detail and to make them feasible to be implemented. And that is part of the reason there's a design review going on now to finalize those requirements, and then the software development can start. And the plan is based on decisions made by, when we had 2 railroad presidents and reconfirmed by Kathy Rinaldi, is to do 3 pilots that are the equivalent of go, no, go gates. So first there's an internal employee-only pilot of onboard sales and validation, then a pilot with customers with mobile ticketing and onboard sales and validation, and then eventually the entire system, including vending machines. So each stage of the way is a gate, and we keep progressing, and then once the pilots are finished, the entirety of the railroad system will be rolled out. So it's a different kind of rollout than New York City Transit is doing by starting with bank cards. It's just completely different, bank cards and then the Omni card.
Mr. Glucksman.
Thank you. Is NICE also going to join the family?
Yes.
So what about the path? I understand they're doing their own way. Will
That
it
was
be
their
allowed in
decision.
Integration? None. That's it. Once the Metro card goes, path is.
No, they're choosing what you might call a mini Omni system, and the technology is such, it's part of the beauty of open payments. First, if someone uses a bank card in the new PATH system, that same bank card can be used in our system. PATH will have its own card akin to the Omni card. They already have one today called SmartLink, that's a contactless card. And the technology, again, is such that we could work to be able to accept their card in our system in the validators and vice versa, and then we'd have to have a back-end agreement.
Final question, who pays for the equipment that being installed in all the buses, the Beeline and the off-property?
They do, that's part of their agreement to integrate. They purchase all the hardware, but it's the Omni software that goes into it. Great.
Anybody else? Mr. Solomon.
Just a question. This was touched upon in the Transit Committee in terms of market share, and I saw on the slide, I think it was a rolled-up number in terms of, all modes. Is there a breakdown that you can provide? Not right now, but
Well, I can right now.
subway and bus. Great, if you can do it now, wonderful.
So
Subway and bus, and also geographical distribution.
That
you can follow up with me on. Go ahead.
Sure. First of all, it's 30, I think it was, at the end of September was 35.4% of all entries to subway and bus were from Omni. So ridership use, it's 35, that's why I said more than 1/3. And subway is higher than that, approaching, I think Rich said it this morning, approaching 40%. And buses are over 20% at this point. That's the distribution in terms of market share. And there's most probably all sorts of factors leading to that difference. But there's a lot of effort underway, focus both from Rich and his team as well as from MTA marketing and communications, pushing adoption up for all of Omni, but also particularly on buses.
Great, and just one more question I see here in the materials about the retail network, that we've reached approximately 34% of the entire network. So is there, in terms of the cards, is there a particular sort of resistance that you're seeing out there in your outreach if we're only hitting 34%?
I'm sorry, the 34% is?
Of the retail establishments that actually have the card.
Okay, maybe I.
Where it can be sold and reloaded, the Omni
Is
card.
that in the report in the book?
Yes.
Okay, so I think there's a definition, just clarification I should make. So we have over 4,600 locations that have been enabled with the proper software to be able to sell and reload Omni cards. We've seen 1,540 plus locations that have actually experienced transactions, and I think that's the percentage, the 1,540. So those are locations that have either sold and/or reloaded a card at this point, and that number grows literally every week. Again, as I said earlier in my presentation, there was a reason MTA had not promoted the retail network and the Omni card during the past year, while we made sure that all all of these retail locations across the 4,600 as best we could. We're sort of 2 levels removed directly from the stores because we have a program manager. But we made sure they had inventory and, that their staff training was going well. We can't really control literally what goes on in each store, but a lot of work was made with the retail partners, particularly Walgreens and CVS and 7-Eleven, but there are other retail partners with us, that they were in good shape. And that is why only now is the marketing beginning of both the retail network locations and the OmniCart.
Anyone else? Last call. Thank you, Amy. This is hugely, hugely important, so we're pretty passionately interested in this. Mr. Cannon, would you, is there an IEC report? Did we? No, you did. Okay. Mr. Cannon, will you do the procurements, please?
Thank you, Chair Lieber. Construction and Development has 3 procurement actions totaling $35.7 million being brought to the Capital Program Committee this month, all of which are in the competitive section. I would like to highlight one of these actions. The highlighted action requests board approval to award a publicly advertised and competitively solicited design-build contract to ELSO Contracting ES2 Enterprises JV for the rehabilitation of the main spans of the Cross Bay Veterans Memorial Bridge and various repairs at the Marine Parkway Gil Hodges Memorial Bridge in the amount of $33,665,000. The work under this contract at the Cross Bay Veterans Memorial Bridge includes the strengthening, reinforcing, and installation of a redundant structural support system for the roadway deck, along with replacement of the existing south pedestrian ramp with a new ADA-compliant pedestrian ramp. The work at the Marine Parkway Gil Hodges Memorial Bridge includes the replacement of expansion joints and the installation of aluminum deck panels. The other items in the procurement package today are a request for the board to authorize the continued use of the request for proposal method to solicit and procure all design build contracts through the end of 2025, along with a modification to an existing contract for the installation of switchgear equipment at Sutton Place, which is connected to the pump room control upgrades for the 53rd Street tube work that is being performed by TC Electric J-Track JV. All of these items are described in detail in the staff summaries contained within your committee books, and I hereby submit them for your consideration and vote.
Questions or comments? I'll take a motion. Second. All in favor? Any opposition or abstention? The matter carries. I think that concludes today's agenda. Can I have a motion to adjourn? Second. We're in adjournment. Thank you.